Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of Mind the XR Gap, where we have a healthy discussion about VR, AR, MR and everything in between. I'm going to be your host, Tiago Andrade, and I'm here with two lovely guests, Ana Sol Peña Rios, you can say hello,
Hello.
and Oskan Badjeji.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so this podcast is for us to contribute and share our knowledge about the fantastic evolution of extended reality, as well as give our opinion on the different aspects of the technology. We are going to talk about the different devices that exist currently in the market, social issues involving XR, and how the technology is being applied for education and much, much more. So this podcast is going to be divided by three segments. One where we try to explain and give our view about some topic or theme, and then we'll go through questions, and we'll end up with the news of today. Today's theme is what is XR and how do we see being applied in real applications? Who likes to start?
What is XR? Well, I think XR is a very polemic term. I mean, there are so many different abbreviatures. There are so many different ways of interpret technology. So I think what is XR is, for me at least, is kind of an umbrella term that it covers a lot of immersive technologies inside. So VR, well, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, and all the terms in between. In the previous discussion, we were saying that all people, they have their own version of these terms. And it's very interesting how they adapt it to different situations. So for me, XR is just that. It's just an umbrella term in which you can put all of these different lovely technologies inside, and yeah, you can use it as you see fit.
It's basically using it as a general term, and we can merge the physical and the virtual in the same place, almost, I believe, instead of trying to come up with more specific terms, and sometimes they are very confusing, and I think we'll get into that in our question time. But I believe this term is to try to simplify and bring it to a more broad audience, the same term that goes all visual or all physical and everything in between.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a bridge, because we have the term from let's say the companies, the enterprise, the business point of view, and then you have the academics that they look at very specific terminology. So for me, XR is just like this big bag where you can put everything there, and it will work.
Yeah. So it's almost like a street slang for immersive technologies, isn't it? For everyone to meet under the one umbrella and just use it very widely. So when you're thinking of if something is XR or not, you shouldn't actually put too much thought into it. If you think it's somewhat XR, it's XR.
So my question is, what exactly is XR for you in terms of the abbreviature? So what the X means and what the R means for you?
Yeah, so the X tends to mean extended, and for some weird reason they don't use the E, because the E can mean a lot of other stuff that we don't intend. So they use the second letter for the X, so extended reality. And R, of course, is reality or realities. That's the proper meaning. But
What about cross reality? Because some people call it cross reality. So what are you crossing here?
True. Cross reality, it's more connected, I believe, with augmented reality, or even sometimes to specific sensors or actuators on the device itself. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but I think that's the difference between extended reality and cross reality.
Yeah, Yeah, extended reality, as we said, is kind of an umbrella term for everything. For me, cross reality is more linked to the interaction between different points in the virtuality continuum. So, for example, in 2000, I think, there was this idea of cross reality by mixing IoT devices or physical devices with VR. So you get um, kind of you link them together. And I think it was an idea that it was thrown by a professor in MIT, Joseph Paradiso, and one of his students. So they had this lab, and then they had a virtual representation of the lab, and then through all of these sensors, they were simultaneously mapping whatever was happening in the physical world into this virtual reality representation, and they call this cross reality. So this interaction between uh, different points, let's say, in the continuum.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
All right. By the way, for all the listeners, if you have any questions related to these topics, XR, VR, AR, whatever you like, and if you want for us to talk about it, just please create a post on Twitter or on Facebook using the hashtag #MindTheXRGap, and we'll be able to collect those and try to answer as well as we can.
So if you talked about extended reality being an umbrella term, so what is the next level when we look at under the umbrella? So we have other abbreviations like VR, MR, and AR. How do you define the line between each of them, and how do you differentiate them?
Yeah, we actually have a lot of terms. So we have, the four recognized in the virtuality continuum. Yeah, you have reality, you have augmented reality, you have augmented virtuality, and then you have virtuality. But there are so many variations as well. For example, in augmented reality, which is when you overlay some computer-generated data into the physical world, there was another variation, which is called diminished reality. And in this one, instead of augmenting the physical world, you were diminishing it. So one of the examples in this one was that if you are looking at one of the big billboards on the street and you don't like what you are seeing in this ad, you could block it. So you are diminishing the reality. So you are blocking the information that the real world provides to you by blocking it through the virtual representation that the computer creates, if that makes sense.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know about that one. I think, in my view, it's a gray area, actually. And even though with the new devices coming out, for example, from Oculus Quest and the Valve Index, they are virtual reality headsets, but they are using actually some AR technology to be able to create the safeguards for the same devices. So now the Oculus Quest, for example, uses the computer vision and tracking system to be able to create your play area. And that's not in the category of virtual reality normally, but they are merging together and becoming something, an hybrid.
Yeah, I think the line between VR and AR is easier to identify, in my opinion. But what about the line between MR and AR? Because when I was doing my final year project, which was a augmented reality campus tour, I realized I was actually playing with both realities because I was creating objects that were aware of the environment they were in. I wasn't just overlaying information to the physical world. So how do they work with each other, and how do you again differentiate MR and AR only between them? Because I think it's more a slippery slope there.
Yeah, the MR is the mixed reality is quite tough to describe or to make it more tighter. Even though I argue that mixed reality is more when you can actually interact with physical objects and they have some kind of stimulus or effect on the visual, and the same way around. So if you interact with something virtual, something will happen in the real world, more kind of a digital twin almost. But to describe more the device that allows you to do that. So the mixed reality, I think, falls more in that category. And that's the difference between AR, because AR, it just grabs your world and overlay information over it. And they don't interact with each other. They are just there to kind of augment everything that you're seeing. So it's giving you extra information. It doesn't change your physical world, for example. While mixed reality actually can allow you to touch the virtual, and you actually also affecting the physical.
Yeah, that is a difficult one because it is very intertwined. It's very complicated to separate them. Yeah, I agree that augmented reality brings information in usually your field of view, and this can be linked to spatial data. But with mixed reality, I think the difference is that you have more rich data. For example, you can have volumetric data that also can be linked to spatial data, and therefore the interaction is kind of richer, but still is a very thin line between them, to be
I
honest.
see. So if we were to give an example to our audience on mixed reality for consumers, what would come up to your mind first? What would be the thing that comes to your mind first? That is in now people are using a mixed reality application or tool.
Well, I will think about something that it has more contextual. So for me, mixed reality also includes some kind of a context, is context aware. So if you are going to put data, it needs to be matched to the space in which is it, and also to kind of in the physical context where it's placed.
Kind of connected with that.
Yeah, yeah. If that makes sense. A specific example. Well, I like to think about the holograms that you can interact with them, but this is a very vague, simple example, to be honest.
A thin line
Yeah,
between those things.
still there. Yeah.
And I think the XR space in terms of terminology and wording per se, it's a bit confusing, and there is no correct answer to solve this problem, I believe.
It is, yeah, it is. It's very confusing. So just to throw a reference on my previous comment, diminished reality, it was proposed by Steveman, which is one of the, is a very well-known professor who has been looking at wearable computing for a long, long time. If our audience would like to read more about that.
Yeah, we will leave that on the description as well as a source.
I have another term as well into this umbrella.
Ooh, go for it.
The term is assisted reality.
Assistant reality.
Assisted reality.
Assisted. Okay. Kind of the Google Home.
Yes. Yeah, this term is more about for use cases when it is focused on assistance for particular people. So you know that we have different type of hardware, right? So yeah, you can use, for example, augmented reality in mobile phones. You can use it on tablets, but you can also use it in headsets. And you have binocular headsets, you have monocular headsets, and particularly with the monocular ones, which are not augmenting per se the field of view, but are just showing a video feed, for example. This is very used in when you have technicians or you have engineers that they look at these wearables and then they get a video feed with information, people are calling this assisted reality because it's not augmented per se. It's just kind of another branch of using wearables for a particular use.
Yeah, I see. But for example, if a tool is only bringing some media information such as text, documents, video, or an image, and it's just overlaying it in front of you, doesn't it make that a television or a mobile screen? Like it's just in your eye, but isn't that just a 2D screen then? That you're also seeing the background on it, if it makes sense. It's just a transparent 2D screen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why this one is assisted reality, because it doesn't focus that much on the immersion, but it focuses more on the use case, which is assisting these people.
But where does reality come in from in the name then? What are we manipulating on reality in sense of anything really?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Maybe we'll ask the audience to that.
True. Again, but I think this just describes how thin layers that we have in this, and how each group actually enters in another, and it's quite messy to for us that we work daily with those devices and with these technologies. It's quite difficult even for us to sometimes define the line. There is actually no line. It's just a blur thing, and we are trying to categorize as best as we can these terms.
Yeah, I see. But now that we're focusing a lot on the naming conventions, do you think moving forward we need more detailed naming of defining different types of realities, or do we actually need to chill down and actually stop confusing people? Do we need to put more names on different stuff, or do we actually need to stop and actually stop using the word reality because we're using it a lot?
Yeah.
So what do you think is the moving forward? We should name more or name less? More detailed, or I think it's the word is called granularity in naming. I don't know.
My view is for the academic part, it's fine because we actually know what we are talking about. We know the context, and we understand, and we are trying actually to come up with a definition. And we are trying to invent new stuff. And when something new comes up, we have the urge to try to name it, or at least categorize it. So in that field, I think it's okay for us to keep going and try to come up with new terms, or to use the terms in different situations to see what fits best. For the consumer side or for the enterprise side, I don't think that makes much sense. We should narrow them down a bit more and make them more simpler for people to actually understand what we are talking about. It's different when we are talking about academics and we are trying to explain something, a new concept. Another is when you're trying to sell a product. And when we have a product and people just know that product, we actually need to define well that device or what we are trying to achieve with it. Sometimes when we talk, again, giving the same example for the Oculus Quest, which is a VR device with full immersion, and you have the hand controllers. But before, you have Oculus Go, which was just a kind of a 360 viewer of the environment, and you couldn't interact as much with it, and we were still calling it virtual reality. So it brings confusion, because when we are trying to sell a new product with more capabilities, and you say virtual reality, people will think about Oculus Go, not the new one. And that can bring a bunch of confusion. And I argue that for the consumer, at least, we should narrow it down and be more specific on the terms.
I think with the term virtual reality, Oculus Go is still a virtual reality, but it's more limited because you are on a different reality now. I mean,
It's
what is reality really?
exactly
It
what is
sounds
reality?
so stupid when we say, "Oh, you're on a different reality." But like, I see a point in the consumer side. It could be deceiving to the consumer because they're not the same thing and there are different capabilities. But I think it just is in any product when you're selling something, you have to be very descriptive of what you're selling.
Yeah.
So I don't think it only applies to VR, MR, AR, but it applies to a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff. I can give you an example that I've learned today. For example, for the XR, which is the theme of today, the XR, when we heard that, we think it's extended reality, but there's something called XR optics or XR cables, which has nothing to do with extended reality. It's about a protocol and a communication method and cabling. So it's quite strange, or it's quite difficult. And when things are not well labeled, I think it brings a lot of confusion for the enterprise level and for the consumer level still. So let's finish with the last news that we could find on the time of this recording. And this one is shaking a bit how Facebook is handling the Oculus headset. For the people who are not aware of this, Oculus announced that they will be changing the ways that users log into the headset development accounts, forcing them to merge their developer accounts with their personal ones, actually removing the developer account, so that will disappear. And the past few days, and sourcing the source from the Upload VR report, that researchers and hackers were actually able to jailbreak the Oculus Quest 2, bypassing the mandatory login of the Facebook. In my view, I think this was bound to happen when someone tries to close the system down in the level that you need to use everything from the same company. These things are bound to happen. I don't know if you agree, but Facebook is meddling with some ethical problems here.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's I don't think it's a good solution to close the ecosystem. I mean, I from the enterprise point of view, I see the value, but for consumers, it has more limitations. For example, if you think about the education side, a lot of schools are trying to include VR and these devices for education. And well, if you, the only way that you can use an Oculus now is by having a Facebook account. Well, that is not safe for students, right? I mean, even for opening a Facebook account, you need to be certain age. You cannot do it if you are younger. So how are they gonna use then this? So yeah, there's I think a lot of questions on if this is the right decision.
And you can't create different accounts with different names because they will be tagged as fake accounts and they will be closed. And from my understanding, Facebook is saying that if, for example, if you buy any application with that specific account, and if you close it, the Facebook account, or if it's being tagged as fake and closed as well, you lose all the apps that you have purchased within, which is not very good. Again, it's not good for the business, actually.
I
Yeah.
see. But for example, for the example Anasol gave for education purposes, they could have something similar to Facebook School Place, where it's a more protected environment, Facebook, only where the students of the school can access and they can log in with that.
True, but for that, the school needs to have that kind of infrastructure, or needs to pay to have that platform open for them, I believe.
Yeah, probably.
And still, schools or even companies that are developing things for XR may don't want to go or pass through the Facebook's servers. Everything will be streamed down to them, and everything will be collected. And we kind of know what Facebook does with that data. And sometimes companies or schools want to close that and have their own private settings to be able to protect the students or the workers or for other purposes. And if you are forced to connect the Facebook account, you're actually allowing them to collect the information they want.
I see. But what if the information is not going to, I mean, surely Facebook is not going to use the information in a malicious way against the students. I'm talking on the consumer side. And maybe it will actually bring more positive upbringing to VR experiences.
It's weird then. I think it's weird because it's kind of, we are collecting, but we are not using it. It's there, but we are not going to touch it. And we know these big companies normally go and touch it. We see that multiple times happening. And we also see that Facebook is not afraid of being targeted and paying some fees, or because of the security breaches they had, or because of their used information wrongly, and they were discovered, and they continue to do and use that kind of information. So it's still weird Facebook is forcing that. Even though if they allegate they are not going to touch it, the question is, so why they are collecting it and why they are imposing the use of it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't say they wouldn't touch it. I said they would use it in a more beneficial way, positive way for the user rather than malicious way. Because if you think of it, all the companies do it now, where you go on your Netflix homepage and you'll get movies recommended to you on what you previously watched and did and liked. So imagine having the same experience with your Oculus Quest being more personal, tailored to you, with the information there, collecting and working. And incoming applications that will be released are, again, something that you're more likely to like and use and buy.
But that's very specific. Imagine a scenario that a company has some confidential project they don't want to share yet. They are still developing. And even game companies do that when they are developing games. They do NDAs and try to protect as much as they can other companies to have a peek of what they're doing. So this means we need to also start doing that with Facebook. How in the legal terms that's going to happen if now you're forcing to use Facebook and they are going to collect that information? You still need a legal way to say this is confidential to us, how the company can protect themselves against those cases.
I see.
Yeah, we were talking about the other day also on the gaming side, right? I mean, if you are a gamer, I don't think you will like to have your personal profile where, I mean, usually Facebook, you have your mom, your aunt, and your family linked to your gamer profile, in which you met with people you don't know. And in a gaming environment, it's not necessarily bad because you are just playing against them. But do I want to have my personal data exposed to these people that I don't know? I'm not sure.
That's very interesting.
That is interesting, but I personally never played multiplayer games on Oculus Quest. But I, as far as I know, when you connect when you link your account, you get an in-game username, and I don't think they can see anything other than your in-game username if you're playing with random people. So I don't know how they would access or find any other information regarding to your personal life, unless you put your in-game name as your full name.
Still, I'm not sure about that, because your profile will be connected to the account. and I believe there's ways for you to see what kind of account is connected to that avatar in game, and that raises a lot of questions. For example, and there's reports that this already happened. Someone that share their personal account. After that, it's easier to understand where that people live, what they do, and people in games could be malicious and can try to target people. And if they simply can easily find their personal account, it's easier to understand where they live and go there and stalk them, for example.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I mean, I guess I had to test myself to see if you can actually see another person's Facebook or details or so on, or you can find them through their in-game account or what you see through Oculus while they're using or playing the game.
Yeah. Because, for example, I'm seeing this, like, even if they hide the name, in one update, for example, they forget to update the avatar, and the avatar will be your profile Facebook picture. That's enough for you to find the real account, and after that, I think it's fairly easy to
true.
start collecting more information about that person.
But there would be a niche example of Facebook making a mistake in the update, or you making a mistake where now they can actually see your picture. So I guess that could apply to any other application you use in your daily life, that in a game, for example, that you, because so many other games now, you can connect your Facebook account to them or your other personal accounts. And if those games
Sure.
made a mistake, then, and they, let's say it's a coding mistake where it shows your full name as your in-game name, they could apply to anything. It wouldn't be as specific.
True. I agree. But in that in those cases, I believe it's still optional. So you have connected your Facebook account because you wanted to. Another thing is Facebook forcing you to connect it, and then if those mistakes happen, you are the person that will be targeted.
I see. Then
You don't
moving
have
on,
the choice.
yeah, then moving forward as a consumer, rather other than doing jailbreak and those sort of pipelines or things to get around the problem, what can the consumer do to make Facebook listen of what they want? Just disconnecting that. Do we stop buying? Do we not use Oculus Quest?
Well, for now, me personally, I'm trying not to connect it. So every time Facebook and I receive an email from Facebook saying you need to connect your account, I rejected the email, even though it's going to be mandatory next year. But I'm trying to delay as much as I can this, and it's difficult. But we should have a way to communicate to Facebook. This is not the correct way. Something should be optional. At least you should be opt in to be there or to connect your account. If you don't like, you should be able still to use your device as well without any kind of login.
Yeah, but how can we communicate to the Facebook? How can we send a message? This is the message, but how can we send the message to them?
I guess it's a difficult one because yeah, it's consumers against like big companies. So yeah, what I've seen is social media. This like voice out your concerns in some of these forums that are available. I'm not sure if it makes like a big impact, but at least we need to try.
Yeah, I think sharing this kind of news, try to make more people aware when they are going to buy the this device. This could be a problem in the future, and try to delay as much as possible the connection between the two accounts. And I also believe that companies, game companies, mostly because they are the ones creating content for these devices, also should voice themselves and saying, maybe we don't like this. I'm not sure, of course, and I'm not saying for the companies to do that, but I think they should voice that and saying if they are not okay with that, to start saying and say no, we shouldn't allow this to happen.
Yeah, I think my future prediction is on this subject. I think moving forward after December, I believe we will all connect our accounts to Oculus Quest. However, if we see if someone spots data being used in a not ethical way, or some news breaks out about Facebook and Oculus Quest, I think afterwards then Facebook will make this optional. That's how I see it going.
Absolutely, should be people.
Yeah, I think from the get-go it should be an optional, but
Yeah.
it's now by default you had to. But I think if Facebook makes a mistakes with this move and it is on the news and people are criticizing it and now have even more valid reasons to criticize, I think then maybe they will make it optional.
Yeah, just also looking at the question on how to make Facebook hear the consumers. I've read something about a developer who is offering a reward for anyone who is able to jailbreak the Oculus Quest, and also I think he has created kind of
Fan
group in
page.
a group in Discord
Mhm.
for people who want to join and let's say who is not happy with the decision, and
Yeah.
they can all join together.
And this is how rebellions begin.
Yes, rebellion against big corporates.
Yeah.
That's not what we're trying to do. We're just starting to have
Healthy
discussion
conversation.
and see
Yeah.
how can we actually achieve that. But creating those kind of groups and communications, maybe it's a way to voice ourselves and saying maybe that's not the correct path that Facebook is taking, and they should look into it and have a different approach. I don't believe that Facebook is so evil that they will not hear people when they start voicing themselves. We just need to find a way to reach to them and say, come on, this is not correct. You should actually correct this, because they will do it if the time comes, of course.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the comment on rebellion, not all rebellions are bad. I mean, we all watch Star Wars. Rebellions are the good
Yeah.
guys, so we don't know. So this is it for the episode, and I'd like to thank Anasol and Tiago to be the part of this first trial. For all the listeners, thank you so much for being part of this new project, and we hope you enjoyed the content and the information that we have shared so far. And stay tuned for the next episode. And you can find us on all social medias where cool people hang out.
All right, see you there, and thanks for listening. Bye bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.